The most photographed skyline in Southeast Asia is hiding something its architects would rather you never learn. Marina Bay Sands, the three-towered, ship-topped icon that launched 1,000 postcards, is about to get bigger. A fourth tower, a 15,000-seat arena, a sky-high casino, a 6-year construction marathon on one of the most unforgiving patches of ground in Singapore. The project was announced with a price tag of $3.3 billion. By late 2024, that number had nearly tripled. By early 2025, it quietly climbed again. And when you add everything the complex has already cost, is currently costing, and is about to borrow, the real figure stakeholders are watching edges uncomfortably close to $20 billion. That's the gamble. Here's the part nobody advertises. The ground underneath it all used to be the sea. And Marina Bay has a memory. 40 years ago, the ground beneath Marina Bay Sands didn't exist. Where the iconic resort now sits, where tourists crowd the infinity pool and private jets spill premium players into the lobby, there was open water. Singapore built this land, poured it, pumped it, reclaimed it grain by grain across decades of dredging that began in the 1970s, piping in sand from riverbeds, barges, and eventually from neighboring countries when domestic sources ran thin. By 1992, the Marina Centre and Marina South reclamation projects were completed, adding 360 hectares of waterfront development. The entire downtown financial district, the one you see glittering in every Singapore establishing shot, is essentially a very expensive sandbar. Singapore is extraordinarily good at this. The country has engineered roughly a fifth of its total land out of the ocean, and it does so with a rigor few other nations can match. But reclaimed land is not real land. Not yet. It settles, it compresses, it remembers what it used to be. And engineers here follow one rule above almost every other. You do not put a skyscraper on young fill. In April 2019, Las Vegas Sands stood before Singapore's government and made a pitch nobody could refuse. A fourth tower next to the existing Marina Bay Sands. Luxury on a scale the city had never seen. A 570-suite, all-ultra premium hotel. A world-class arena. Additional gaming capacity. A new sky park. The original investment was pegged at $3.3 billion, with construction set to reshape Singapore's skyline. The numbers penciled out beautifully. Marina Bay Sands had been running at 94 to 99% occupancy for years. The exhibition halls were perpetually booked. The 5,000-seat ballroom simply couldn't absorb the concert and conference demand flowing into the city. The existing resort was, in corporate language, capacity constrained. In real language, it was a printing press waiting for a bigger building. Singapore agreed. Las Vegas Sands put down a $963 million upfront payment to lease the land. Architect Moshe Safdie, the man who designed the original 3 towers, was brought back to design the fourth. Everything was on track. Everything was on budget. For about 18 months. Then, quietly, the number started moving. By the third quarter earnings call of 2024, Las Vegas Sands revealed something that reshaped the entire conversation. The cost had climbed to $8 billion. Roughly 2.5 times the original $3.3 billion estimate, comprising $4.7 billion for design and construction, $2 billion in land premiums, and $1.3 billion in pre-opening and finance costs. Then, a few months later, came another announcement. A second supplemental agreement. Design revisions. Additional gaming floor area. More ancillary space. Las Vegas Sands agreed to pay approximately $1 billion more to Singaporean authorities in exchange for the changes. Of that $1 billion, roughly $850 million was due in the second quarter of 2025, with the remaining $150 million falling in 2026. The company insisted the $1 billion was already baked into the $8 billion total. Analysts weren't convinced. Because the story of mega projects built on soft ground is almost always the same story. The first cost overrun is never the last. Beneath every skyscraper, in Marina Bay sits a layer of soil that engineers treat like a sleeping animal. It's called marine clay, a soft, waterlogged, extraordinarily compressible sediment that once formed the seabed. And it is, geotechnically speaking, a nightmare. Marine clay has low shear strength. It deforms under load. It consolidates for decades after you build on it, squeezing water out of itself in slow motion while whatever you built above ground settles with it. Modern Singapore has spent decades perfecting techniques to manage this. Prefabricated vertical drains, preloading programs, ground compaction, and continuous monitoring using inclinometers and piezometers, all to accelerate settlement and strengthen foundation layers before construction even begins. The original Marina Bay Sands solved the problem with brute force. Each of the 3 towers was seated on hundreds of large diameter board piles, driven deep into stronger geological layers, transferring the colossal vertical and lateral loads past the marine clay entirely. It worked. The towers have held. But here is what engineers understand that tourists do not. Settlement never fully stops. It only slows. And the new Tower 4 will be heavier than anything built on this site before. With gaming floors, arena halls, and a sky roof adding eccentric loads in directions the original towers never had to resist. The soil has been sitting quietly for 30 years. It is about to be asked a new question. 6,000 miles away in San Francisco, there's a Padesgate 58-story condominium that's been tilting for over a decade. It's called the Millennium Tower, and its story is the one every reclaimed land engineer tells as a cautionary tale. The tower stands on landfill that was once part of San Francisco Bay. Its foundation doesn't extend into bedrock. Over the years, it has sunk measurably and unevenly, requiring a retrofit program so complicated that early fixes appeared to accelerate the very settlement they were meant to stop. Singapore's engineers are not the engineers who built Millennium Tower. They are, by almost any measure, among the most disciplined geotechnical professionals on the planet. Singapore requires reclaimed land to sit fallow, sometimes for decades, before heavy construction is permitted on it. The Marina Bay site has had that time. And yet, the warning embedded in Millennium Tower is not about incompetence. It's about humility. It's about what happens when ambition, cost pressure, and tight schedules collide on ground that was never meant to hold what we're putting on it. Engineers call this risk stacking. Investors usually notice it after the first crack. What Las Vegas Sands is actually building is staggering. The 4th hotel tower will feature 570 luxury suites, expanded gaming options including a sky gaming concept, a 15,000-seat arena, 110,000 square feet of meetings, and convention space, a new sky park, and a curated collection of high-end restaurants and retail. Designed by Moshe Safdie, the original architect, the new resort is positioned as a companion piece to the existing icon, with a signature rooftop experience meant to redefine the city's profile. The arena alone is arguably the most commercially significant piece of the project. Singapore has, for years, been losing tours and large-scale events to Tokyo, Seoul, and even Bangkok, simply because it lacked a venue of the right size. 15,000 seats is the sweet spot, big enough for global touring acts, small enough to sell out. The existing 5,000-seat ballroom and outdoor plaza had become a bottleneck, and Las Vegas Sands expects the new arena to shift Singapore's entire position in the live entertainment market. But all of this, the suites, the arena, the sky gaming floor, has to sit on a new foundation, heavier than its neighbors, on land that, while older than many reclamation sites, is still behaving like reclaimed land. Every extra square meter of floor space added in the design revisions translates, at the geotechnical level, into a load the original engineering brief did not assume. Buried inside the paperwork is a deadline almost nobody outside the industry has read. Las Vegas Sands has stated that construction is expected to be complete by June 2030, with an anticipated opening in January 2031, but any extension beyond the July 8, 2029 deadline in the development agreement requires approval from the Singapore government. That single date, July 8, 2029, is the lever the government holds. Miss it without permission, and the entire contractual structure can be renegotiated. Get it wrong, and penalty exposure escalates. In construction, 4 years feels like a generous window. But in mega projects involving deep foundations on soft ground, 4 years is not generous at all. Marine clay sites routinely demand long preloading periods, months, sometimes years, before superstructure work can even begin. Supply chain delays in steel and specialist equipment have plagued Asian construction since the early 2020s. Skilled labor in Singapore is expensive and finite. Every week of geotechnical slippage compounds into every future phase. And the moment a project of this scale starts slipping, the renegotiations begin, often at costs that dwarf the original overruns. Add it all up, and the real number on the table isn't $8 billion or $9 billion. It's closer to $20 billion when you zoom out. Start with the original Marina Bay Sands, built for roughly $5.5 billion. Add the $1.75 billion reinvestment program, currently upgrading the existing tower's rooms, dining, and amenities. Stack on the $8 billion plus IR2 expansion. Factor in the $963 million upfront land lease paid in 2019, the additional $1 billion supplemental payment negotiated in 2025, and the project financing, roughly 65 to 75% of the expansion cost, that Las Vegas Sands has said it intends to carry through debt. The company expects to contribute just 25 to 35% of the project cost directly, leaning on financing for the rest. Layer in the long-term interest burden, pre-opening costs, and the operational risk of a 2031 opening into a tourism market nobody can reliably forecast, and the cumulative capital exposure centered on this single parcel of reclaimed Singapore land approaches, and on some analyst models exceeds $20 billion. It's not one mistake. It's a chain of decisions, each reasonable on its own, that have compounded into one of the most concentrated bets in the history of Asian hospitality. So here's where it stands in 2026. Construction is underway. The foundation work has begun. The clock is ticking toward July 2029. Las Vegas Sands is publicly confident. The company projects the expansion will add roughly $1 billion in annual EBITDA once operational, and Singapore's tourism trajectory remains one of the strongest in the region. Safety's design is, by every early render, spectacular. The arena is already being called the venue that will reshape Southeast Asian live entertainment. And yet, beneath all of it, the marine clay is doing what marine clay does. Slowly, quietly, patiently. Whether Marina Bay Sands IR2 becomes a crown jewel or a cautionary case study will depend on what happens in the next 4 years, and on whether the most disciplined geotechnical playbook on the planet holds up against ambition it has never been asked to carry. If deep dive investigations into the world's most consequential megaprojects are your thing, subscribe and stick around. There are a lot more $20 billion questions where this one came from.